Hi, I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler with the Lansing Lugnuts, the Oakland A's High A affiliate.
I'm Alex Jensen with the A's Low A affiliate, the Stockton Ports.
And we're back again, Alex and I, to discuss more about this 2021 season, the players who impressed us, the stories that stand out in our mind, and look ahead to next year as well. Alex, when first we talked, we touched on a number of different players, a lot of the headliners. Who's a guy who maybe slipped under the radar that you feel needs some time?
Wow. Well, I'll give you, maybe we could touch on a few guys here because I think there are a few guys. Let's start with Robert Poisson, who I think is on everyone's radar. I don't think we talked about him last week. I think for him, maybe a little bit of an aggressive assignment. I really think the A's kind of pushed him to low A. And there were a lot of times when he really, his skill set really stood out. He was 18 years old. He was one of the youngest players. And, I think that the A's had a young system in general. So maybe it's not fair to say they pushed him to low A. He had over 200 and he played a pretty good short. So, he was ready to be probably out of Arizona. But really exciting skill set, for me. I mean, he can really play short. He's got range. He's got the arm. He's got the speed. He's got all the tools to play shortstop in the major leagues. He's only 18 and he was really playing in games. I mean, that's one thing that we have to remember, right? Is these guys coming from the Dominican and a lot of countries in Latin America, and in particular Dominican, they're really playing in games for the first time. Robert Poisson went from playing showcase ball in the Dominican to going to the A's alternate site where it's essentially inter squads all day. And in 2021 in Stockton, he was really playing meaningful games for the first time. So he struggled some at the plate with guys, pitching to a scouting report, but he also showed some power. Like I said, he showed speed. Again, he's got all the tools to play shortstop in the major leagues. I don't know where they're going to start him next year because, the overall numbers aren't great. Like I said, he went through, some prolonged periods, a few weeks at a time where he really struggled at the plate. But I mean, if you watch him over a long period of time, especially play short, you can see why the A's invested the money in him that they did, because he really does have the skill set to play shortstop at the major league level when his development is all said and done.
I mean, the youngest player in all of full season baseball breaking out of spring training.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, he really held his own a lot of the time. I mean, like I said, there were periods of time when he really struggled. But he really, I would say for the most part, he held his own. And I think it's one of those cases, right? And I'm sure you've seen this too, where you have to kind of look beyond the numbers in his case and take into account that, like you said, he was the youngest player in affiliated baseball in full season ball.
Yeah, I think that whole idea of looking beyond the numbers. I've got a good friend who's a broadcaster in the league, and he would evaluate things based on major league numbers. So, for example, your plus minus run differential as a team, even though the team's rosters were constantly changing.
Yeah.
And you could look at it the same way with pitchers, whether it's the K to walk ratio, whether it's a batter and their OBP or their OPS or whatever these numbers are. These are really good numbers to evaluate guys, except in the minor leagues. You can't evaluate a guy in Michigan when it's super cold, or you can't evaluate a guy in certain spots and you can list the factor. It's really interesting to go whether it's month by month or whether it's to say, this is where they realized that there was an eye issue. This is where they realized that maybe you should stop switch hitting, or whatever might happen over the course of a minor league system, a minor league season. Things change with regard to a guy's development.
Do you want to give me a guy for you, and then I'll touch quickly on a couple other guys in Stockton this year? Or do you want me to go first and then you pick it up?
I really like you throwing out Robert Poisson and saying, here's what I saw. I'll throw out a guy at you and just say, here's what we had with William Simonite. William Simonite was a grad transfer to Wake Forest after playing 4 years and graduating, had a walk-off homer on senior day at Cornell, and then off he went to Wake, and he was signed as an undrafted free agent in 2020. 5-round draft, not taken. The A's swooped in, and I think it was Neil Avent who was his scout. All right, so Simonite joins us, but we've got three catchers. We've got three catchers who are all making their pro debut. Drew Millis is our headline guy, so he's getting the predominant amount of time. And in a 6-game series, Drew is going to catch probably 4 of those games. So Jared McDonald and William Simonite divvy up the rest. And at one point early on in the year, I think Simonite became our everyday first baseman because Patrick McCall got hurt. And so we just need you at first base. This was a guy who was a college third baseman in addition to being a college catcher. We just put him wherever we needed him. He became an emergency pitcher throwing a 38-mile-an-hour eephus.
I saw you tweet that video this morning.
Yeah, it just, when he throws his lob and he was trying quick pitches and he's trying hesitation leg kicks. He's this big 6'4" dude, strong guy, long red hair, red beard. So he looks like a character when you see his still shot. And then you get to meet him and he's doing his yoga. He's doing his breathing exercises. He's cooking for himself home and road and making sure that his mind is right, his body is right. So I was really impressed by, as the year went on, he didn't wear down. And this is his first professional season. He got stronger and stronger. And now as I look back at the year, there were a couple of big swings later on in the year where I go, man, William Simonite had big swings. Hit a walk-off home run in the bottom of the 7th and final inning and a doubleheader. That was our only hit in the game. So it broke up a no-hitter and it won the game.
Wow.
Hit an 0-2 pitch with 2 strikes in the final inning, with 2 outs in the final inning, a grand slam. Bases loaded, 2 outs, 0-2, grand slam, and we went from being down 3-0 to winning the game 4-3. And there was more where he came up with crucial blasts and blows and was suddenly drawing walks because teams decided they couldn't even pitch to him. This was all just his first pro season when he was a not priority guy and he's our emergency pitcher. So I want to know what Simonite's going to be next year now that he's got a year under his belt, and maybe he's just going to be a great depth piece. Maybe he's going to continue to be a backup catcher or backup first baseman or whatever he will serve as for Midland and later on for Las Vegas. But he was such a crucial glue guy who came up with the biggest hits of the entire season. And I don't think he should be overlooked.
I think there's certainly something to be said too. And I think it speaks to the intangible piece too, right? Of getting stronger as the year goes on. Your first full season as a professional. I mean, it's one thing to play in a college season where you're playing 3-4 games a week for 3 months, then you go on to summer ball. But when you're playing 6 days a week from early May until the middle of September, and you're getting stronger as your first time doing it, I mean, I think that bodes well for his future, right?
Yeah, it used to be, and still in a case it is, that I would look at these players and I'd say, all right, July, you're going to show me what you're made of, because at the start of the year, it's too early and you're going to see nothing but fastballs. And then suddenly teams are going to have a book on you. But in August, everyone's going to be too tired. And I remember with Bo Bichette, he burned out at the end of the year and he just hit the wall. And we had guys this year who hit the wall, and by the end of the year, they were tired. But Lawrence Butler didn't hit the wall, and William Simonite didn't hit the wall. And when you're playing just as well, if not the very best that you've played all year at the end of the year, that says something to me.
No doubt. No doubt. I'll give you a couple more guys, position players, and then I'll give you a pitcher as well, because I don't think I've talked to a whole lot of. I think I mentioned Grant Holman last week, the A's 6th-round pick out of Cal, who was super impressive in his last start. But how about a couple outfielders that A's fans might recognize? The names they might recognize. Brian Buelvis is one. And I think by the end of the year, he was leading our team in home runs. I mean, he's, doesn't look like a guy with a whole lot of power. But I think he hit 16 in about 100 games or so as a 19-year-old in Low A West, which was pretty impressive. He has a lot of international experience with the Colombian national team. And he's not a guy with like one carrying tool, but he does a lot of things well. Like he hits the ball the other way well, especially for a 19-year-old. He's got some surprising pop. He's not a burner, but he's a good runner. He plays all 3 outfield spots well. He was also a guy that was at the A's alternate site in 2020, and I know the A's really like him. So he was a guy, just a great infectious personality. It really played the game with a good energy. So he's one guy. Then another guy is Junior Perez, who, I know that everybody in the A's system, and Rico Brogna in particular, love this guy's tools. And the only one that has yet to come is that hit tool. But hits for power, speed, routes in the outfield, arm. He was acquired for Jorge Mateo when the A's shipped Mateo to San Diego in 2020, I believe. But he's got all the tools. He just needs to put together that hit tool. There's still some swing and miss. I think he finished just over 200 on the season. Another young guy, like 19 or 20 years old. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head. And it'll be interesting to see where he is next year, because I really think that he has the tools to climb the ladder. And there's a pitcher who actually went to Southern New Hampshire University, Jesse, and I wasn't sure that was like an actual school. I thought it
Baseball
was just
powerhouse.
Baseball power. Okay, there you go. So Division
They
two
play good ball
in New England. But I thought that, until I met Jake Walkinshaw, that it was just an online school. But he really improved as the year went on. 94 with good sink on the fastball, could reach back for 95. Really sat around 91 to 93 with good sink. A swing and miss changeup, and I thought his slider got better as the year went on as well. I think he got sent to Arizona at the end of the season, in all likelihood because of an innings deal for him. And it was tricky this whole year in 2021, especially for pitchers after not having pitched at all in 2020. But I thought he was a guy that, when he was on, he was one of the Port's best pitchers, if not the best starting pitcher that the Ports had, after the graduation of guys like Jorge Juan and Jack Cushing, and guys like that. So those are three more guys that I think I'll be interested to see where they are next year. And I think there's some upside.
I like this. In terms of, we're just batting that tennis ball back and forth. I'll give you some guys, but first, that whole concept of the online institution, picturing him zooming into his baseball team. All right, guys, right. I'm here. Let's go. I'm warmed up. Remember to mute when it's your turn to hit. So I'll take the serve. Jordan Diaz. So you mentioned Brian Buelvas, and that immediately brings us into the Lugnuts Colombian national teamer. 20 years old, turned 21 mid-season, homered on his very first swing of the year opening day, just crushed it down the left field line. On the very first road trip of the year, we played at Fort Wayne, a notoriously difficult ballpark to hit home runs, homered 4 times in 5 days. And then later on in the year, his plate discipline strengthened to the point that I had a scout for the Cincinnati Reds ask me flat out, have I seen Jordan Diaz swing and miss on a pitch that was outside the strike zone? Because at that point, this scout had watched him for a full series and had not seen him swing and miss at a pitch that was not in the zone, that he just wasn't expanded, that he was locked into that point. His opposite field approach, outstanding. His strength, outstanding. The entire year, though, they were trying to work with him to try to figure out where is he going to play defensively, which we had when we were in the Blue Jay system with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. The bat was so good, where are you going to put the guy? So Jordan was at third, and then they threw him over to first base. And by the end of the year, Jordan Diaz was playing a legitimate left field and having some fun out there. He's not the fastest guy, but he feels like he's fast. He's out there dancing on the bases. He has such fun. He plays the game with such a great passion and joy for it that he locks in at the plate, but at the same time, he can crack up the umpire on a foul ball up the third base line. That kind of sense of humor combined with talent and competitive fire. I loved him. And his finest moment, to my mind, Daniel Espino, a big-time prospect for Lake County, Cleveland Guardians organization, came in, and he's striking
Cleveland
out.
Guardians. That's the first. By the way, that's the first time I've heard that in casual conversation.
Espino's striking out double-digit dudes. He's striking out 10 guys in 4 innings, 10 guys in 5 innings, every start. And he did that to us too, except Jordan Diaz twice took a high 90s fastball that was away. Like, the dude is hidden, spotting up outside corner, and then throwing wipeout breaking stuff off the corner and down low, and Diaz is spitting on it. And he tries to come right back, elevate, away, no way you're going to hit it. And Diaz, twice in the same game, swatted him out to right field to beat Lake County, to win that game for us, taking this young kid with his golden arm deep. Espino, if he stays healthy, is going to be a major league star. Jordan Diaz, if he stays healthy, is going to be a major league star. Let me answer your Robert Poisson. I think that the Lansing Lugnuts example is Austin Beck. Lasser
Yeah.
Armenteros is a different story. He excelled with you. He ran into a brick wall with us, had difficulties with health. I'm not sure where Armenteros is going to be. I think that the glass is a little bit more full on Austin. Um, Austin Beck has such flashes of genius. His arm, there's that flash that it was the strongest on the team, that he could play a carom or grab a bounce and wing it, and that ball was arriving before the runner was ready. His bat had that flashes of when he was locked in, you could not throw it to him because he would destroy it. Grand slam to right center, 430, 440-foot shot to left center or center field. And the difficulty still was that inconsistency, that he would have games of greatness, games where he looked like the best player in the league. And then the next game, it would be a frustrating first at bat, a frustrating call, a frustrating thing would happen. And then the game would turn frustrating for him.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be interested to see what Austin Beck is next year because the talent is still there.
Do you think with Austin that maybe it's just, and I wasn't in Stockton when he was there, that was the Zack guy, but I got a chance to call probably 10 of his games. But do you think for him, it's just a matter of staying healthy and playing games? Because, you go back to his draft year, he tore his ACL in high school, played a full year for Beloit, but then I know he missed at least a handful of games in Stockton in 19, obviously didn't get the 2020 season. And I know he was down with an injury and battled through some stuff this season, if I'm not mistaken, right, in Lansing?
Yes, he did. Right from the very start of the season. He arrived to us on opening day nursing an injury. He did not play in the first 7 games. And then he got injured later on the year. So it was not a full year for him out there on the field. I think the key for him is how does he deal with adversity? Whether it's adversity with his body, whether it's adversity with calls or with a slump, because everybody slumps and everybody slumps multiple times during the year. So what do you do when that happens? What do you do mentally? What do you do to help take yourself out of it? He was surrounded by great teammates with the Lansing Lugnuts this year. He was surrounded by good friends. Like he and Shane Selman struck up a good, strong friendship. And Shane Selman was a good dude to be around. And also another breakout power bat. But I really do think that the question for Austin next year will be, when things go well, that's great. But how are you when things start going in the wrong direction?
That's what really separates the the good from the great, right? I mean, that can be the difference between making it to the major leagues and spending your entire career in the minor leagues. Because as you mentioned, it doesn't matter how good you are, everyone's going to struggle.
Yeah, we had a player with the Lugnuts who's really skilled with the Blue Jays organization, who every time that he struggled, he thought it was something mechanical. And the coaches would just say to him, this isn't your swing. Your swing right now is just the same way that your swing was then. It's just not falling in for you. Just keep on keeping on. Go into this same at bat, like the same way you did with the prior at bat, like you do with the next at bat. And if it doesn't happen, it's okay. Take it into the next at bat. You're not a different guy. But if your brain convinces yourself that you are, well, then that's the pitcher's battle is taken care of for him.
Matt Olson had a great quote earlier this season. We saw the season that he had this year, right, with the A's, and it's still going on. I think he has 36 home runs and over 100 RBIs? Anyway, he mentioned that in 2020, the same thing. He would try and think too mechanical in the box instead of just kind of trusting himself. And this season, he's gotten to trusting himself, and look where it's gotten him. Right? It's not a sport that you can really think, and really no sports are, right? Maybe in basketball, if you think I need to keep my elbow tucked on a jump shot or whatever, but when you're in the box, you're trying to hit a ball that's coming at you at 95 miles an hour and changing directions and changing speeds. That it's too much to think about. I mean, you just got it. Once you get in the box, it's got to be see ball, hit ball. Once you get on the mound, it's got to be, here's where my target's set up. That's where the ball's going. Right. Yes. I mean, you can't be thinking about where's my front side and, where are my hands when I'm loading? What's my timing like? Where are my hips firing? It's just the guys are playing at too high of a level to do that.
Well, that's why the big key is muscle memory, right?
Yeah.
Where you don't even have to think about it. You can just play ball. And I'm going to relate it to broadcasting. As a broadcaster, we know that we need to give the score. As a broadcaster, we understand what are the different fundamentals that we need to layer in, and what do we need to do to take care of ourselves? What are the keys before each pitch, during each pitch, after each pitch, at the start of an inning, at the end of an inning? There are different things that we understand that we have to deliver, because if that is not a part of the broadcast will lack. But if you spend the entire time during the broadcast thinking about those things, it will come out robotic instead of like it flows. You and I could break down a Vin Scully call or a John Miller call or whatever it might be, a Ken Korak call, and say, this is why it works. But if you're calling, thinking about what you need to do to make it work, it's not going to work. Yeah. And that's all of this. It comes down to the word trust, where you understand that if you just trust that your mind, your body knows what to do, you can just do it.
That actually makes me think of another guy with the Port that you'll probably have in Lansing this next year, right-hander Pedro Santos, kid out of Cuba, who, I mean, talking to the Port's pitching coach, Chris Smith, he called him a Lamborghini. You know, I mean, he's up to 98 miles an hour with excellent, I mean, really good off speed, you know, Snapdragon, you know, 12-6 curveball, which honestly, so our angle from the press box in Stockton is low, and it's kind of off to the first base side. So you don't really get to see the shape of all the pitches until we got to Modesto. And Modesto, you're right behind the plate. You're at a good height, and boy, you could really see the action on his curveball and really a 2-plane break, right? And really sharp. And when you have to respect 98 and you've got that type of pitch, I mean, you've got the makings. I mean, that he's got a chance. You know, then he started throwing a changeup that he really, he really started building on as the year went on. And by the end of the season, his last 2 or 3 outings, I mean, he really relied on it. And it was like a 91 mile an hour 2-seam action changeup. You know, it was hard, but it had depth. But much like with Austin Beck, especially early in the year, you know, when things went wrong for Pedro, I mean, the ball would get rolling really quick, and all of a sudden he's walked 4 guys, and then, you know, he hits a guy, and then a guy hits a double, and he walks another couple guys. I mean, he walked 7 guys in his first start in Modesto this year. But by the end of the year, I think he had really gotten an idea of how to harness his emotions on the mound and really focus on the next pitch. And that's a guy that really, I mean, if he's able to do that, and he's only 21, and the A's signed him out of Cuba. This was his first year in professional baseball. I think they signed him out of Cuba at late 19 or early 20. I can't remember exactly. But that's a guy that if he can do that, you know, more often than not, I mean, you're looking at a Jorge Juan type of talent where, you know, he's got the stuff, he's got the body, he's got it all. Once he puts that all together and becomes more consistent and really trusts his stuff and, you know, stays confident and doesn't let that one little, and like I said, by the end of the year, his last start came against Modesto, and I think he went 4 or 5 shutout. It was his best start of the year. Struck out 6 or 7. A couple little things went wrong, but he was able to regroup and get back on the mound and make pitches. And, you know, he's really exciting. And I think if I were to guess, I'd say he'd be in Lansing next year. And he's a guy that I'm really excited to see how 2022 goes for him, because he's got all the pieces to be a major leaguer.
Looking forward to having him. That sounds awesome. I'll give you a guy who pre-Lawrence Butler in the 2021 draftees' arrival was probably our very best player. But you mentioned Beck's injuries. Injuries robbed this guy of the year. And it's Michael Goldberg, the 3rd rounder out of Georgia Tech from 2020. Michael Goldberg had power. He arrived, and there was this thought that he couldn't hit for power. Oh, he's got power. He was making leaping, extra base hit, robbing catches at the wall. He was throwing out guys at home plate, diving catches in to his right and to his left, stealing bases, getting on every which way. He's got the bat, he's got the arm, he's got the defense. There were concerns about his arm because he was coming off of shoulder surgery. Mm-hmm. He threw fine from what I saw. He just needed to stay healthy. And if they can get anything resembling a healthy season from him in 2022, if I were them, I'd probably send him back to Lansing just to give him that high A seasoning. but depends on his health and depends on how he looks in spring training. If he comes in looking good and looking healthy, the guy's got major league ability and tools across the map. Speaking of pitchers, I'll give you Colin Palouse. Colin Palouse jumped up to high A right from short season ball. And he came in and there was a ton of ink written about Colin because he had suddenly shown up throwing 97, 98 miles an hour and eyes were wide open. He didn't throw 97, 98 with us. It was all right. He threw 94 to 96. He painted. He's got a slider. He's got a developing changeup. He understood how to pitch. And after suffering through his lumps earlier on in the year, he is now an Oakland Athletics bona fide starting pitching prospect who ended the year looking great in Double-A. Probably starts next year in Double-A, but he's got a chance to make his major league debut next year if he continues to take these strides forward. So with each of those guys, Goldberg, just stay healthy and it's there. And Palouse, once again, a guy who, whether you heard his name or you didn't, he can pitch. He's got the stuff to excel.
With Goldberg, and you mentioned him briefly last week, but I know, if I'm not mistaken, his calling card in the draft was obviously, his bat and his ability to get on base and his versatility defensively, right? So in your opinion, what was his best position?
Probably center field, but we didn't see enough of him, unfortunately. Yeah. I just got to see him, like with Austin Beck, you see his flashes and you go, oh, okay. With Michael Goldberg, you saw his flashes and you say, that guy is a superstar if he can do this consistently and stay out there. So maybe center field, but it's a really good problem for the Oakland Athletics to have if he's pushed in center field by a number of other guys who can all play out there. Like, we'll see if Lawrence Butler is a center fielder or not. Johnny Butler joined us. Johnny Butler looked like a center fielder, 14th rounder from NC State. Michael Goldberg was the ACC batting champion in 2020. Johnny Butler was the ACC batting champion in 2021. Both those guys can run. Both those guys can hit. Both those guys can feel. Johnny's a left-handed batter. Michael's from the right side. Both of those guys have unexpected pop. And so there's that potential for a Michael Goldberg, Lawrence Butler, Johnny Butler outfield in high A Lansing next year, where all three guys can play all three positions, and I'd be perfectly fine with that.
It's really interesting because in a lot of these conversations that we've had over the last couple of weeks, it all comes back down to health. Not all of it, but with a lot of guys, we talk about nagging injuries. And you look at the farm system rankings for whatever that's worth, and the A's are always toward. I really think, Jesse, if a lot of these guys were able to stay healthy this year, we might be, people, I shouldn't say we, because, but people might be talking about the A's system in a little bit of a different light.
I think what is going to be the key for that is Tyler Soderstrom is already respected. And so, yes, be healthy, Tyler. But I think that there are no doubts in him. I think that what prospect evaluators and prospect rankers want to see is the increase of depth. Who steps up to join him? And Zack Gelof, boom. Max Muncy, here you go. Jeff Criswell, stay healthy. He's a bona fide top prospect. Mm-hmm. Lawrence Butler, as we talked about before. And who else? Jordan Diaz, with what he did in Lansing, that's a bat that you're going to need to watch. There are other draft picks that they took last year that I could put forth and say, Brett Harris showed me something in how he ended the year as a tremendous defensive third baseman who had a batting eye, who gets on base because he leans into everything, and he's got power, great power from Harris, the Gonzaga standout. I want to see what he brings into next year. Drew Swift, the Gold Glove shortstop from Arizona State, how well does he hit? Because he's got a great batting eye and he steals a ton of bases. And I'm curious who else rises immediately to your mind. Max Muncy should be on the list, but I think that that's what Oakland would need and what fans would want to look for is how many other good, respected prospects are there in the organization to help Tyler Soderstrom and Zack Gelof out?
Yeah, I think we talked about a few of them. CJ Rodriguez is another one that comes to mind, fifth rounder out of Vanderbilt. His defense's calling card really good receiver, and he just the way he thinks about the game, just in conversations with his one, the one knee down. I'm sure you see that it's growing in the game with catchers going down to one knee to kind of expand the strike zone a little bit. But just the way he thinks about the game, he really sees it through the umpire's eyes. Now, if he can get the bat going, I mean, I thought he really hit into some bad luck down the stretch in Stockton. He hit a bunch of balls hard the last couple series, didn't have much to show for it. So you look at his final numbers over his 30 games or whatever it was in Stockton, he only hit about 180 with a home run, but I thought he deserved better faith than that. So, if he's up around, 260, 270, now you've got a guy, right, who is a difference maker in terms of stealing strikes and controlling the running game and really working with the pitching staff. He's another guy that comes to mind in terms of a guy that might be able to take. I don't think he may never have a difference-making bat, but there's so much more that goes into the catching position than just hitting. And if you want to project these guys forward, let's say, and I'm not saying this would ever happen, but let's say you want to move Tyler Soderstrom to first or to left or whatever the case may be. He's a guy that in this same group of prospects climbing through the ladder can make a difference defensively behind the plate and allow you to be a little bit better on both sides of the ball.
And by the way, it just occurred to me, you're getting Pedro Pineda next year. And so you're going to see
Yes.
another big time prospect. Pineda is respected, just like Max Muncy should arrive in Stockton next year. So things should
It'll be a fun
fun.
group. I forgot about
yeah.
Pedro Pineda. He had a great summer in Arizona.
I think that and just in looking at the young talent that was coming through in the Dominican, in the Arizona Complex League, it was really fun to ask our guys who would arrive in, whether a DJ Lee or a Brett Harris or Drew Swift, the other guys who were there, Johnny Butler. Hey, of the guys that you played with, who do you like? Jalen Greer, I had the chance. Give me the scouting report. Let me know who's good. And it was fun to have each of them say, oh, we've got some talent. We've got some talent coming up. Where you and I, because we're looking at the lower levels of the system, of course, our blind eye is to the guys that we can see their stats. We can say, Mickey McDonald looks great. Or Nate, is it Mondu?
I never had him, so I don't know.
I apologize to Nate. There are other players. Jonah Bride, here's to you. Max Schumann and Jake Suttleson, to briefly touch on them. First, to touch on Suttleson, undrafted free agent out of Harvard, the Ivy League Player of the Year. It comes into Lansing. He hits. AA needs a hitter. AA needs an outfielder. He's our top performing player as we've got a ton of guys off to slow starts. Suttleson immediately goes up to AA, spends the rest of the year there. It's fascinating to watch him because he feels like he doesn't have great foot speed, and he feels like he's an awkward defensive player. He feels like he's got an awkward swing, and then you watch him and you go, well, that was a diving catch, and there's another home run. Suttleson just seemed to me to be a really good piece, and a guy who kept on surprising with some unexpected athleticism and really unexpected power that you don't understand what kind of pop he has until he goes out and in the game, the pop shows up. And there he was in AA getting challenged immediately. I'm curious how he's going to be next year when he's got an offseason under his belt. He should have been in low A, except with the way that everything was set up, you had all the teenagers, so he started in Lansing. Max Schumann, just to give him a moment. Max Schumann came out of Eastern Michigan, and first in Beloit a couple of years ago, they needed a first baseman, so he had to play first. And now with the Lugnuts this year, we need a shortstop, so he has to play shortstop. Midland has 3 shortstops. You, meanwhile, have Robert Poisson. With the Lansing Lugnuts, we've got a bunch of different guys, but Kobe Vance is a super utility guy. Elvis Peralta Jr. we're playing all over. Max Schumann go out there and play short. And then he goes up to AA, and he plays second base, and he plays center field. And just like Zack Gelof, he's ending the year in AAA. He was so smart this year at understanding what he could do in stealing bases, because in high A, the step-off rule was invoked for the first half of the year. Pitcher has to step off and step toward the base. All of our pitchers balked. There was a lot of lack of clarity and lack of comprehension on the issue among our pitchers. But Max Schumann, as a base runner, understood and was gone and stole 34 bases with us and up
Wow.
that to 50 total with Midland. And he was hitting for power. He hit a first pitch home run early in the year because Fort Wayne fed him a first pitch fastball, and he don't do that. He knew what to do with it. He could draw walks. He could get hit by pitches. And when he got on, he made teams pay. And there he is, this guy who can play any defensive position. But he hit 220s for us. One of his teammates told me that every now and then he'd hit a home run, and that would put him into the home run hitting mindset, and that threw him into a slump. Well, he goes to Double A, and he starts playing even more within himself. And oh my God, the guy turned in a 500 OBP, I believe. Was it the month of August, where he reached every single time, it felt like? And by the end of the year, he has a batting average above 300 and an OBP near 390 for Midland. And he now becomes a guy that we look at next year going, there's a spot for him because he can play every outfield and every infield position, and he steals bases and he gets on and he's got some pop. What a great guy for the A's to have in their organization.
No, he's the guy that whenever Melissa Lockard almost every other day, Max Schumann, our friend Kim from Arizona, right? The people that watch the system on a nightly basis. That was a name I saw pop up quite a bit.
Such a good dude, and played high school, had a high school rivalry against Jeff Criswell. Same hometown, those guys playing one another all the way up. So it's fun to see them both in the Oakland A's system. With Criswell, by the way, I feel like because of the early season injury limiting him, we didn't get to see how good he was. But here's what I saw from Jeff. Have you ever seen, and we can extend this to any sport, but I think of basketball, a guy where you just go, man, he's not on today. His handle is slightly off. His jumper is slightly off. He might not have finished. You can just tell he's not himself. And then you look at the box score at the end of the game, and you're like, scored 26 points.
Yeah.
So
he's got natural ability.
Yeah. That was Jeff Criswell, where I'd watch him pitch and I'd be like, he missed with that one. And maybe his fastball command, maybe his secondary stuff doesn't have great command. Oh, look at that. It's another 2 scoreless. It's another 3 scoreless. And the pitch count wasn't high because guys weren't barreling him and there was weak contact. And by the end of the year, there was some harder contact. But I just came away from watching him pitch going, he was scratching the surface of what he was capable of, and he was too good for this level. It was a basketball player who was able to get to whatever shot that they wanted at any point. And the only question is, would the shot go in or not?
Yeah. And can you stay healthy? I mean, again, it comes right back to that, right? And I can think of 3 pitchers that have some perceived upside, including Criswell, that just weren't able to stay healthy this year. Criswell, Tyler Baum, who was the A's 2nd round pick out of North Carolina. I think it was 2019. And, he was in Arizona pretty much all season long. I think he spent some time after the draft in Vermont in 19, but I think he made a few appearances for the Complex League team. And then another guy that we had at the beginning of the year, who I think ended up getting Tommy John, I'm not sure on that, Jose Dicochea, who was like an effortless 97, 96. Young kid, but I mean, just super easy. Ball just jumped out of his hand. So 3 guys I think that you can look at as potential, good, like we talked about depth. I mean, Criswell sounds like he could be a headliner, but we talked about depth. 3 guys that could offer some depth on the pitching side that just weren't able to log a full year.
No. And we'll see what Stevie Emanuel's turns out to be, the 5th rounder out of Washington, because at the start of the year, he looked really good. And then he went down with an injury. And by the end of the year, he was once again seeing action in the Arizona Complex League, but that's his first pro season that has been robbed from him. Right. There's a bunch of guys who, whether it is the Tommy John costing them next year as well, I mean, Brady Basso, poor guy, or whether it is guys who will be able to come back, and we'll see what Tyler Baum is. We'll see what Stevie Emanuel's is. It's going to be fascinating to see how they're integrated with all of these arms that the A's drafted in 2021. We got to see the undrafted free agent Jack Owen out of Auburn, and he has the Barry Zito curve. He's got that great looking lefty curveball to go along with a changeup, to go along with a fastball. And he pitched east-west a lot of the time. He's probably exhausted. He was the Auburn ace. He logged a lot of SEC innings after not pitching in non-conference play. We'll see how he is coming into next year. It spoke well of him that they thought he could pitch in high A. Kyle Verbitsky is a 6'6", 6'7" Penn State Nittany Lion who 4-seam fastball, big fastball, 12-6 curveball, and changeup. And by the end of the year, I think he struck out 6 batters in 2 1/3 innings in his final appearance. Big strikeout guy. So there are some really cool arms. You got to see a couple of these 2021 draftees as well. And then there were all those guys who you and I didn't see, like Aaron Holiday, the relief ace, or Mitch Myers, the pit ace. So it's going to be fun. You mentioned first, looking ahead to 2022, it's going to be fun what things look like next year.
Oh, no. And Hunter Bro is another guy from that 2020. I think he was the 20th round pick out of Oregon. I did not see a 20th round pick when I saw him pitch. I mean, 95, 96 with a splitter and a slide. I think he only, his last outing, if I remember right, was a little rough, but he gave up, I think, only 1 or 2 runs over his first 4 appearances. And he looked like the real deal. So I'm excited for you to see him in Lansing next year as well. I think he's got a chance.
I love scouts. I love seeing a guy come in and going, let's see what the scouts saw in this guy. And especially in our first conversation, we talked about how good the clubhouse guys are. That's fun. Just seeing a guy who comes in and you go, off the field, this guy is a pleasure. And on the field, this guy's got a chance.
No doubt. No doubt. There's nothing better than that. And then, getting to hear about their react, like we talked about, I wasn't around the team a whole lot this year because of all the protocols and restrictions, but, getting to hear about, guys when they got called up and their reactions, a guy like Armenteros, who really was demoted, right, to low A to start the year, and getting to hear from Rico Bronya how excited all the guys were for him when he got promoted to Lansing after, tearing the cover off the ball in Stockton for the first month. A guy like Lawrence Butler, who put in the time over 4.5 months or whatever it was in Stockton and was one of the better players in the league. I'm actually excited to see the all league, the league all-star teams come out, because I know for a fact he got several, but I wasn't allowed to vote for him, but I know for a fact he got several votes. But I think the camaraderie and guys kind of rooting for each other, I think that's a really cool part of minor league baseball, and something that, I haven't been in another organization, but something that feels not unique, but special about the A's organization and the players that the A's have.
Something else I wanted to touch on, West Michigan's broadcaster stopped me immediately on our first series with them. And he said, "You guys have the best stories in the league." Just to give a couple of those stories. The Shohei Tomioka story is wild to me. That this was a guy who went to Toyo University specifically to play on their baseball team. And he admitted to me that he cared nothing for schooling. He was there to play baseball, and he made only 6 appearances in all of his time there because they're so loaded with NBPL, or the big talent, the NPBL first round talent, guys who are getting drafted to play on the big teams, the Yomiuri Giants and onward. So he just doesn't get a chance to pitch. So off he goes. He's out of college. He gets a job working for a company, and he starts pitching for the company team. And once again, it sounded to me like part of the appeal for working for this company was he wanted to play on their baseball team. And now he's playing in the semi-pro adult baseball league. And he sees on Twitter that the Oakland Athletics are holding a pitching tryout, which first he thinks there's no way this is real. But he's convinced, no, this is actually a real thing. The Oakland A's are actually holding a tryout here in Tokyo. Show up, tryout. He shows up. He throws some pitches for a couple of minutes. He leaves. He told me that they were talking to him in English afterward, but he didn't speak English, so he had no idea what was being said. And they follow up and they sign him from this tryout. And then he has to wait all of 2020 because there's no minor league season, and he joins us this year. And he was a joy. He was a joy to be around. He's now 25 years old. Like, I wish that the clock wasn't against him in that sense, but dude's got a curve. He's got an improving cutter, fastball changeup, and there were flashes this year where it's going, this guy's got an arm. And by the end of the year, there he is throwing in the mid-90s. And then you set Tomioka aside, and on the same team, you've got a guy like Charles Hall, who had one of the best curves in all of high A. Ridiculous hook, and by the end of the season you couldn't hit him, but he's skinniest guy that you can possibly imagine at 5 feet 11 inches tall. He was a high school outfielder who didn't go to college, spent 3 years living with his parents and working at Panera and playing semi-pro ball, where there he learns a curve and decides, maybe I should try to pursue this. So 3 years after graduating high school, he pursues with a JUCO team in North Carolina, and from there goes to tiny little Tusculum University, where he strikes out 22 guys in a game to break the D2 record against a team coached by Blackjack McDowell. And then he gets drafted by the A's, and now here he is, age 27, and you can't hit his curveball. He's striking out the best prospects in the league with this curve fastball combination that was wonderful. It was art to watch. And so simply those stories of these two guys trying to make it happen and showing that they've got the ability to make it happen, it was such a wonderful experience this summer.
That is so cool. I mean, Tomioka, right? Is that what it was?
Yes.
Just working for a company team or playing for a company team. That's, who would have ever guessed that would lead him to professional baseball in the United States?
Yeah. Like, how many people purchased Panera sandwiches from Charles Hall
Yes.
who could now not hit his curveball?
From working at Panera to potentially pitching in the major leagues.
Well, and you and I get these stories, and then when these players arrive in the majors, it's one of my favorite things to do, to go to Baseball Reference, to go to the debut page, and to see what round was everyone selected. Because it's not just the first rounders and the second rounders who make the major leagues. And what organizations have they bounced through? What is each of their story? Even if you're a first rounder, let's say Zack Gelof makes the major leagues next year, there's a great story to be told in how he got there. And then once you get to the major leagues, it's not done. What happens next for you?
Right. No, it's fascinating. And, like you said, the fact that every guy has their own story and, their own thing that makes them, and they all move at different speeds, and maybe one guy will lag behind, and then all of a sudden he'll be an all-star in the major leagues a few years later. It's just, and the fun part for me is to watch kind of those adjustments, right? What's going to happen for you throughout the course of a season that's going to make you click and finally start and put up some numbers, and then eventually climb the ladder, right? I mean, how many guys end up in the major leagues for the first time when they're in their late 20s?
Or you could even twist it about and say, how many of these guys might not make it, or make it only for a cup of coffee, but end up being really valuable coaches or really valuable scouts? Like, what is their ultimate future within the game is a fascinating question.
No doubt. I mean, look at Billy Beane. Billy Beane's a perfect example.
Heck, David Forst had his hits record broken at Harvard by Lansing Lugnut's first baseman, Patrick McCall.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that.
Those were my two favorite Lugnut's connections with the A's brass. It was Patrick McCall going after David Forst's record, and Don Schultz, your pitching coach, getting drafted in the same first round as Billy Beane.
The connections you have in the game of baseball.
I want to ask you, we've been speaking about players. Alex, you had games. You had series that were ridiculous this year. What were your comebacks like to watch?
They were incredible. I mean, they really were. I think there was in the same homestand, there was a 9-0 comeback and a 12-0 comeback. 12-0 comeback was after the sixth. So you tell me which one of these you think is crazier: the 12-0 comeback where the Ports were down 12-0 after the sixth inning, or when they were down 9-0 going into the bottom of the eighth and they came back to win that game in extra innings.
I mean, why do I have to choose?
It was a guy would hit a 3-run home run. You're like, okay. Yeah. And then one thing would lead to another, and all of a sudden the tying runs at the plate. And Saheed Valenzuela is hitting his first career home run and his only home run of the season with 2 outs in the ninth inning to tie the Visalia Rawhide at 10, I think it was at the time, to send the game to extra innings. So that was crazy, obviously. But, Banner Island Ballpark, where the Ports play, is conducive to some offense. So, especially when the wind's blowing out to left field, I don't want to go as far to say as you're never out of a game, but it's kind of one of those places where anything can happen because you've got the wind blowing out to left field. There's a short porch and right where an area of the wall juts out to probably 330 feet away in straightaway right field for a seating area called the Jackson Rancheria back porch. So I think once a few of those things happen, you start to get some belief in the dugout and the momentum starts to build. I really didn't feel like any of those were out of reach before the comeback started. I felt like the games were over, right? I mean, 9-0 going to the 8th inning. You kidding me? Like, that game's over, but yeah, I mean, the
I'm glad the
12-0
players
comeback.
disagreed.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they did. The 12-0 comeback was because I think that was the coolest one for me, because the Ports didn't have to go to extra innings. Like, they were down 12-0 after the 6th, and I think there was either one out. I can't remember if there were 2 outs or one. I think there was 1 out in the 9th, and Alexander Campos hit a no doubt shot down the left field line. Only question was whether it would stay fair, and I think the final score was 14-12. But man, I mean, you want to talk about never say die. I mean, just there were more than that too. It was more than just the 12. I'd have to get my scorebook to look up some of the other ones.
Well, you played Modesto, and I believe in back-to-back days you hit game-tying homers in the bottom of the 9th inning.
The Ports went 8-4 in that homestand against Visalia and Modesto, and I think 4 of those 8 wins were walk-offs. 4 of them, and 2 of them were those 2 crazy comebacks. And like you mentioned, the other one, Danny Bautista hit a walk-off home run to left center field in the 9th inning to beat Modesto. And I think if my memory serves correct, the Ports were down by 3 maybe going into the 8th inning of that game. Again, I have to look at my scorebook, but yeah, just wild. I mean, just wild. I mean, especially for a team that ended up, in last place. And all those comebacks came in August when their fate was pretty much sealed. So just, for them to play that hard and, not just kind of mail it in, I think it really says something about the group.
Yes, absolutely. Like, that kind of clubhouse cohesion, that's how I felt about the Lansing Lugnuts all year, was they never had a long losing streak because every single game was a new day and a new opportunity. Heck, Yurdel Vargas is a guy who showed up with us from AA Midland, a glove guy, not a bat guy, had never had a walk-off in his whole life, taking on, at the time, the best team in our division, the Dayton Dragons, and he walked off against them. RBI single through the right side. He told me the next day he'd never had that walk-off in his whole life. Day after that, he walked off again. RBI double in the bottom of the 9th inning. And on both of them, he brings in Drew Swift. Swift, what a great last name, right? Perfectly describes him. But yeah, that this guy could walk off twice in 3 days against the best team in the division. And you just go, okay, what do you guys have in store tomorrow night?
Baseball's the best, man. Every day, you come to the park every day, you're going to see something you've never seen before.
We saw the bases were loaded. It's a crucial spot. We're playing an arch rival, and it was a swinging bunt, and we scored all 3 guys. Pitcher threw it away, the catcher threw it away, the pitcher they just kept on throwing it back and forth, but it was never to the guy who it was intended to go to, and everyone just kept on running around the bases. It was a really fun merry-go-round.
One of my favorite plays of the year was Zack Gelof's first career home run. Was an inside the park home run to straightaway center field. Inside the park home run, which is always exciting, right? I mean, you don't see many of those anymore just because the way ballparks are built and how fast outfielders are. And, you really have to have a misplay. This was a ball that was off the center field wall. The center, Deshaun Knowles of the Angels organization, Inland Empire, goes back, leaps at the wall, hits the wall, kind of falls over the ball, caroms back to the infield. And and this is what I was telling you about last week about how I think with Zack Gelof's size, his speed really surprises people because the throw came into third and he's already at third base and he rounds it and scores easily. So I don't think they were expecting him to be as fleet of foot as he was. Neither was I when I first saw him. I said, my thought was, oh, this is a power third base guy. No, he can run. And that play right there really illustrated it.
Let me give you the opposite. Kobe Vance is 5 feet 6 inches tall. He played every single position for us. At the end of the year, I asked Scott Steinman, hey, give me a 9-position game for Kobe Vance. And he said, we don't want to put him as the catcher. That's why we wouldn't do that. Kobe Vance's first 2 home runs of the year, he didn't get to experience a home run trot because both times he was convinced that it wasn't a home run. It went out to left, bounced right back onto the field. There was some controversy and conversation. He stopped at second. Same thing happened the second home run. Bashed it out to left in West Michigan, a death valley of a ballpark where fly balls go to die. And yet this one died over the left field wall, but somehow they had convinced Kobe it got caught or it's still in play. And there he is stopping at second again. And I just wanted to give the poor guy a full, true home run trot. And he finally did get that third home run, and he was able to really do the round trip tour.
Love it.
Any other favorite moments from this year?
Well, let's see. Cover the walk-offs. I can't. Well, CJ Rodriguez's first hit of his career was a home run. That was pretty cool. I can't think of any others off the top of my head.
I'll give you one more, and we can wrap things up with a fun question to wrap things up. We had 3 guys traded. We had 3 guys traded to the Washington Nationals for Josh Harrison and Yan Gomes. Yan Gomes, a former Lansing Lugnut. So I got to see Yan Gomes on his way up the Blue Jays organization, the first Brazilian to make the major leagues. We had him for a full week. And I was told by our manager, Sal Fasano, this guy's going to be a major league catcher. And he was right. Josh
Long
Harrison,
career,
I got to see in Peoria. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, Drew Millis, Richard Wash, and Seth Schumann were packaged in that deal. And just remembering that day as the trade and the news is breaking, and our guys are going through their pregame warmups, and they're going through defense, and they're taking BP. And then each guy is called over and told, and we've got the full-on team hugs on the field because all 3 of those guys were loved by their Lansing Lugnuts teammates and the coaching staff, and everyone kept up with them. So Millis, Wash, and Schumann are traded to the Nationals and assigned to High A. High A for the Washington Nationals is the Wilmington Blue Rocks. Colin Palouse hears that these guys are going to Delaware. Colin Palouse is a native Delawarean. He goes, oh my God, let me give you restaurant recommendations. Let me tell you everything that you need to do. Colin sets it up so that those 3 former Lansing Lugnuts stay at his home. His parents are their host family.
Really?
So I think that Seth got Colin's bedroom and that Richard and Drew stayed downstairs. But yes, the Palouses hosted the 3 newest members of the Nationals organization for the rest of the year.
That is so cool. That is so cool.
So I'll leave you with that story. And then here's my question for you is, like we started to touch on this, but 2022, what are you looking forward to?
Well, I'm looking forward to a more normal, hopefully, knock on wood, a more normal set of circumstances for us, building a closer relationship with the players and the coaches, just being able to go into the clubhouse and sit down and just shoot the breeze with somebody. I mean, that's the biggest thing. We talked about some of the names that were, Max Muncy, Pedro Pineda, some of the other guys. I know Jalen Greer looked like he had a pretty good, summer in the complex. I know he's a high school draft
I'll
pick.
Tell you this
Chicago,
quickly.
Right?
So I got to meet Jalen Greer, and his grandfather was wonderful. Jalen, they're trying to convert him into a super utility guy, playing the outfield in addition to shortstop and throughout the infield. He's a youngster, right? He's a teenager. No, yeah. I believe he's 20 years old. He takes every single pitch. He refuses to swing the bat. And he's admitted, maybe I should swing the bat more. But I'm so used to the younger you are, the more aggressive you are at home plate. Every single plate appearance with us, he was working his way into a good hitter's count. I'd never seen anything like it.
He spent some time with you guys up there for a couple weeks.
Yeah, at the very end of the year. So maybe the final couple of days. Yeah. But I can tell you, plate discipline is going to be fascinating with him. Sorry to interrupt you.
No. And then, a lot of the guys we talked about, Lawrence Butler, Tyler Soderstrom, a lot of these guys, Zack Gelof, I'm looking forward to seeing what 2022 has in store for them because, Soderstrom and Gelof, known commodities, Brian Welvis, known commodity. Robert Poisson, known commodity. But Lawrence Butler really put himself on the map this year. And I'm really excited. I mean, we talked about him a lot in our most exciting players to watch this year. I'm really looking forward to seeing how his career unfolds. And of course, starts with 2022. So a lot of the guys we had in Stockton, I'm looking forward to seeing how their careers, the trajectory their careers begin to take starting in 2022. And I'm looking forward to a lot of the, some of the higher profile guys we're having Stockton and learning, like you said, some of the other stories for the 2022 ports.
That
How about you?
2021 third rounder from Gardner Webb. Ooh, here we go.
Matt Manning.
I think Denzel Clark, wherever he goes next year, he could really be one to watch. I'll throw out the word to you, competition. I think that this year was very difficult for the Oakland Athletics and all of the major league teams in trying to figure out who to assign where. Well, next year, you in Stockton are going to have the competition with everyone getting integrated into the organization, all of the guys in the Arizona Complex League, anybody poking their head up from the Dominican Summer League who looks really good, plus those guys who are with the Stockton Ports. There's going to be such competition to make low A, to make a full season team out of spring training. Just like I think there's going to be such competition between our Lansing Lugnuts this past year, the Stockton Ports pushing their way up, anyone else who they want to challenge. I think that we are going to see at high A and low A. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a spot where coming out of spring training, you and I are going to look at our team and say, on paper, we're pretty exciting. We're pretty tantalizing. And we don't know what injuries are going to happen, but on paper, we're going to say we're loaded with guys who can really put themselves on the map in 2022.
And we'll see what this offseason brings in terms of the A's direction, because it really feels like the big league club is potentially at a fork in the road type of place in the 2021 offseason, losing Starling Marte, losing some of the other arbitration eligible guys. Jan Gomes probably won't be back. This is a fork in the road. It kind of feels like offseason for the A's. So which direction will they go? And that could be another thing to take into account in this mix.
Yeah, that's really important. That's a really good point. And then, as you said, for both you and I, working with the Oakland Athletics organization for a second year, where now we've got these relationships solidified. Now we know the folks. Now I know when a rover comes in, I'll be introduced to them, but I'll be able to say, I know you, Gil, right? I know you, Jim. I know who Gil Patterson and Jim Eppert are. I can see Keith or whomever it is that comes in, that I'm just familiar with our Oakland A's people. This was such a blast getting to know everyone this past year. And so here's to greater things to come.
Seconded. I totally agree.
Well, he's Alex Jensen. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler. We thank you very much for keeping us company during these two conversations.
It's been fun. Thanks, Jesse. I look forward to doing it. Potentially, we'll see what happens as this offseason unfolds, but it's been fun, man.